This problem says solve each equation by the square root method. So what that means is we're going to have to do a little bit of algebra and then square root both sides because we need to use this square root property here. And that's why they call it the square root method. And the square root is just this thing here. That's what the square root is. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to have to get this squared term by itself. So this is different from the factoring because in factoring we have to do the standard method or standard form. And in this one, we don't. We simply isolate the squared term, whatever it is. So for this one, it happens to be x squared. So that means I'm going to get rid of this minus 25 here. So I'm going to do that by adding 25 to both sides. So then this is going to give me x equals 25, or x squared equals 25. And then I square root both sides. Now, keep this in mind, when I square root both sides, I end up with a plus and minus here when I square root. Hopefully you remember that. If not, there it is. So this is going to be x equals plus or minus the square root of 25. And you may have not even written this down, but the square root of 25 is 5. You might have just jumped to that. And that's fine if you do, so it's fine if you do. So this is really going to be plus or minus 5. So those are the actual two answers for this problem using the square root property because I square rooted here. And just remember, when you do the square root, make sure you add your plus and minus in there. Now the reason why that is, if you didn't know, think about this. If I take a number and I plug it in there for that x, okay, so if I do a negative in there, okay, let's say I do a negative 5. So a negative 5 times a negative 5 is a positive 25, isn't it? That's why that works. And then the other reason is if I do the positive 5 times the positive 5, that's also going to give me 25. So that's always going to give me the same number when I square it. So that's why it doesn't matter, or it does matter, but that's why I get the plus or minus when I square root. Okay, next one. Okay, so this one, remember, I'm going to isolate the square root component. So that's my square component. So that's squared right there. So that means I'm going to move the 9 over. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Okay, so on the left side, I'm going to get 2y plus 3 squared equals 9. And then I square root both sides using the square root method because I'm square rooting. Okay, so on the left, I get 2y plus 3 equals, and remember, I get that plus or minus 3. Okay, and I'm not quite done yet because I'm going to have to split this up into two equations here. I don't know if you see them or not, but one is going to be 2y plus 3 equals positive 3, or 2y plus 3 equals negative 3 because of this plus minus here. And then from here, I'm just going to solve. So I'm going to subtract 3, 2y equals 0, divide by 2, y equals 0. So there's my first answer for this one. Now I'm just going to do it again for this one. So I'm going to minus 3 from both sides. So that's going to be 2y equals negative 6. I divide by 2, y equals negative 3. So we get the two answers, y equals 0 and y equals negative 3. Now this one here is set up for us already, this number c here. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to square root both sides because it's already set up for that. So on the left, I'm going to get 3z minus 2, because remember those cancel, equals plus or minus the square root of 5. Now again, that's an okay number. Don't try to get the decimal approximation or anything. That's a good answer. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I had to do one of these because a lot of people are afraid of those square roots, and they come up a lot in math if you continue any further. So anyways, for the next part here, I added the 2, so then I get 3z equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 5. And this is something you're going to get pretty good at as you go on in this class, with the square roots. You're going to get better at them. And then what we're going to do is divide by 3. So then my z is going to equal 2 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 3. Now again, I can write this two different ways. So this would be one way to write both answers. Another way to write both answers is this way. Z equals 2 plus the square root of 5 over 3, or comma, 2 minus the square root of 5 over 3. So that's another way to represent those answers, those two different answers. So there it goes.